Hello, everybody. I'm Kirsty Craig, founder of KCA People and a seasoned recruiter and SME business owner of some 36 years. We've worked with all kinds of companies, large and small, over the decades and have seen for ourselves just how critical people are to business success for any organisation, large and small. So, our purpose in life is to help our SME clients be brilliant employers and reap the rewards that naturally occur as a result. Rachel is our Director of Operations and a seasoned L&D and HR professional. Hello, Rachel.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you here. Thank you for taking the time to join us. So what we will be going through today is quite a lot about driving behavioural change in people managers. And I think the first place to start is to look at how people become people managers.
So, Rachel, can I just ask you, do we carefully select them based on their competencies and skills?
Very rarely, and this is probably why we will need to drive behavioural change. So if I just chat you through this slide, this is actually very recent. I picked it up last week on Indeed, which was aimed at advising employees how they become managers. So if we just walk through this, some of the things that were stated: you've been in the same role for a while. So that doesn't necessarily give us the competencies for being a manager. You exceed expectations in your current role. We always say you might be an expert widget maker, but you do not automatically make a good people manager. It's a complex skill to master. And finally, that you possess soft skills. So soft skills are sometimes called human skills, relational skills, and now we're actually starting to get somewhere. So when we look at these, we need to think about, okay, what soft skills does the people manager need? And how much of these do we need them to see? Do we need to see, sorry, in their behaviour?
It never ceases to surprise us, I have to say, as recruiters, and never mind anybody else, but just how little emphasis companies place on the people management role, that they're so key to an employee's engagement and their retention. Poor engagement leads to losing talent and low productivity, and even active disengagement, which can have such a negative effect on business success.
Absolutely, totally. So this is why we want to look at this in a little bit more detail. So let's have a look at the management touch points. So this slide here, we've looked at the employee journey through a company from start to finish. And we've put there the kind of key touch points that a manager would have with their employee or their report. Now, in larger companies, say 50 plus, you will likely have a HR manager in place to advise and support in the delivery of this process. However, if there's no in-house HR function, then the line manager is usually responsible for the delivery of all aspects of people management. You can see here just from some of the touch points, it's huge, and it's what makes being a manager rather difficult. And that's why we would advise learning and support in delivering the process well. Um, if the management touch points are not delivered well, it can lead to a myriad of issues. At worst, you're looking at legal compliance issues, such as, for example, a perception of favouritism, which could lead to claims of discrimination. This has no qualifying period. Or if the length of service is more than 2 years, something like unfair dismissal is possible for not following a process. As Kirsty alluded to, other issues which don't necessarily have legal implications, but have a real effect on the business could be poor engagement, high turnover employees, and no succession plan. And these will impact business performance and any attempt to grow the business. And this is because management is much more than process alone. It's the soft skills that really make an excellent people manager.
So, what do we mean by soft skills? sometimes called human or relational skills. It's things like communication, empathy, delegation, or influencing engagement. In short, really, how we relate to other people. So, how the message is delivered makes all the difference. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, as well as being able to understand and influence the emotions of others. So you may well have come across this expression time and again. So, if you have high emotional intelligence, you can actually create a psychological safety in the workplace. And that can have a really positive impact on the working environment for everyone, which obviously is only a good thing, isn't it? So, next thing to consider is how do we influence behavioural change? I think that's one for you, Rachel.
No problem. Let me move to the next slide. So, when we're thinking about influencing behavioural change, we need to know your starting point. You need to be clear on what does good look like. So, in order to do this, you may have developed a competency profile linked to a manager's role in your company, or you may have behaviours based around your company values. So it's not a one size fits all. It's important to note that expectations will differ slightly dependent on the company culture. Here at KCA People, we use LIFO behavioural profiling quite extensively, and this is to understand someone's preferred behaviours. How this works, so people filling a survey, and that plots their preferred behaviours between four quadrants, which are indicated on the slide here. This gives us focus in our starting point because you can then identify behaviours in other quadrants that could prove useful. So, what behaviours would you like to instill? What behaviours do you want your people managers to show? These are the behaviours that need to be successful in that role. So, if I think of an example, perhaps as a business, you've identified that you would like to have more supportive behaviours in your people managers. And what you're actually seeing at the moment is more thorough and methodical behaviours, more process driven. In this instance, we would be adapting our behaviours from the reason quadrant, so the bottom left there, where thorough and methodical sit, to the excellence quadrant, so the one that harbours more supportive behaviours. All completely doable and achievable. It's just plotting where you're starting from and where you're going to.
Fascinating stuff, isn't it? So, which learning and development intervention is right for you and where you are with your business? That's the key. So, we need to ensure a baseline of understanding if we are to achieve our ultimate objective in this. So, for many newer managers, this will involve some sort of training course. To maximise that learning journey, our experience has shown us over the years that an interactive format is much better than being basically death by PowerPoint, because it allows people to practice new skills and behaviours in a sort of a psychologically safe environment. And this usually delivers a really successful outcome. If it's lecture style only, or as I say, death by PowerPoint, research shows that actually we only retain a mere 5% of this information. That's only after only 2 months, which is nothing. And that's highly unlikely to lead to behavioural change, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And we must remember as well that the training approach can also be really effective for more established managers. It's not just the newer managers to post. They maybe might benefit from exposure to a newer thinking about a topic. And, you know, things come out all the time about new management and how we should actually practice inclusive leadership, for example. So once we know that they have received the training, so they've got the skills and behaviours, we then need to look at how we pull these behaviours through to their everyday to create that muscle memory.
And this is where typically where people falter, because changing behaviour is tough. It's the unknown. It takes us out of our comfort zone, and we none of us like that very much. We might be worried about how our colleagues see us as well, or doing something differently than before.
Yeah, totally. And this might be where we would benefit from engaging our team with the fact that they could be seeing slightly different behaviors. So they understand what's happening. It can create a bit of uncertainty if you just start to change behavior. You start to lose your predictability. But also by including the team, you actually create a feedback loop, which is incredibly important when you're looking at behavioural change. As well as that, this is where perhaps a mentor or coach can be helpful. So I'm not sure if you've worked with a coach or mentor yourself, but their focus is slightly different. And you can also have internal or external coaches and mentors as well. Each has their own benefit.
That's really true, Rachel, actually, because in my own experience, in having been mentored and mentored others, I've seen the benefit to both myself and my mentees.
Yeah, absolutely. And Personnel Today has done a really interesting article recently, and they've recognized coaching as a critical learning and development intervention to manage behavioral change. And I think this is because it helps to keep people accountable for that change. And we're back to that feedback loop again as well. So it's still providing that feedback mechanism to close the learning loop.
And when obviously talking about feedback, is an essential part of this is developing the ability to give yourself your own feedback, to self-reflect, if you like. So one of my biggest learnings over the years has been looking at myself in a mirror, figuratively speaking, and asking myself whether I handled a particular situation in the best way I could have done if the outcome, hadn't been what I was expecting or wanted. So I think being able to recognize your own weaknesses and react accordingly is a real strength and very necessary if you're going to manage people well and help them be the best they can be.
Absolutely. And that's something that actually comes up in emotional intelligence a lot as well, that ability to self reflect. So, when we're looking at coaching and mentoring, we can describe this as active learning. It's not the lecture style that only retains about 5%. So, when the delegate sits back and receives this with no requirement to display any understanding or application of the knowledge after the event, it sadly just fritters away.
Gosh. So, as a business owner, you may well have reached the point where you want to take your business to the next level. And in order to do this, you know that behavioral change is central to achieving this successfully. So, coaching and mentoring are brilliant tools which can really help to facilitate this change.
Absolutely. And so you might be sitting there and thinking, okay, how do I know whether it's coaching or mentoring that's needed to help this behavioral change? What sort of key indicators should I be looking for? What do you take into consideration? Well, my favorite answer of all, it depends. And it very much depends on your objectives for going down this route. Um, what what I would absolutely state is that behavioral change needs to be modeled at the top of the business first of all.
And that is because a fish rots from the head.
Yes, one of our favorite sayings here, absolutely. So, when you are thinking about this, the sort of things that you should be considering are perhaps the speed of response to an employee's question. So, from their coach or mentor, um, that might determine whether you want to work with an internal or external coach or mentor. Obviously, if you're working externally, you normally meet maybe once a month. You have a little bit more access if that's internal. But the other thing to think about is what we've already mentioned and psychological safety. So that's far easier if the support is external. It's far easier to bare your soul to someone who doesn't have any influence on your career moving forward. So a few things to consider.
And to sort of support this, really, there are four learning and development trends for 2024, which are courtesy of Personnel Today, and these are the ones to watch out for this next year. So the first one is a more focused, personal and accountable approach. Change is constant, and the best way to engage with it and to succeed as an organisation is by supporting and developing your leaders. I mean, that may sound obvious, but you'd be surprised how many companies don't get this. Rapid change is often destabilizing for us humans at the best of times, but now with the constant pace of social and technological change out there, it's actually getting harder and harder for employees to keep up. So, we need to think about how we equip our leaders at every level to help their teams through these rather complicated times. Emotional intelligence is what we need to foster, because that's the type of intelligence that creates a sense of grounding in other people. So a more focused, personal and accountable approach is to leadership development, which supports these relational skills, will help power organisations through these times of change.
Totally. The next thing on there is helping leaders to manage ambiguity. And I do feel there's a lot of this in the management role. So, for example, here we're talking about behavioural change, and yet there's a whole school of thought out there about bring your whole self to work. So, how do we balance those things? How do we walk that line? And organisations and teams are demanding more from their leaders. To thrive as a leader in a modern organisation, it's not just enough to know about your numbers anymore. If there's a delivery gap, you must also be equally, if not more adept at those relational or human skills. We also need leaders to be able to build healthy team cultures. We know we've got an evolving remote and hybrid working landscape now. And to be successful, they need to be capable of understanding the nuances of inclusive leadership, be equipped to manage the high levels of ambiguity, be able to read a room in person and virtually, and also have strong practical skills. It's a lot to balance.
There's a lot to take on board as well.
Yeah.
So, and then the next thing is, showing evidence of impact. And the trick is to start with the end firmly in mind. So linking strategy and programs to the larger business objectives is key. And it provides a foundation, by which to make those all important decisions. So when it comes to leadership development, thinking beyond the participant satisfaction to higher level metrics such as key learnings, behaviour change, which we've already talked about, and ultimately connecting your programme to tangible business outcomes like promotion, retention and engagement are essential.
Absolutely. So I think we can see here, Kirsty, from what you're saying, it's about wrapping it all up together. Learning and development can't be seen just on the side of something. We've got to bring it all in together. And that will really help us to drive behavioural change. Many learning and development initiatives fall short of this major goal to create sustainable behavioural change. Why? Well, it's easy to forget new information quickly, even if it is really relevant or energizing. What I also think is that you don't often see a lot of behavioural change from kind of a one day or a short action. And the reason for that is we're back to that accountability again. So we've got no one to hold them accountable, to give opportunities to receive feedback on the change. So what happens then is that people fall back into their day-to-day lives and resume their old habits, especially under stressful circumstances or conditions. It's really hard to keep that behavioural change moving then. So that's why behaviour change is a critical learning and development metric that organisations will increasingly need to invest in. So programs like coaching that combine personalised learning with accountability over time is a proven way of actually shifting people's behaviours. So if you want to see behavioural change, please think about a coaching programme.
That's great advice, Rachel. Can you just talk us through I think that might be really useful to do this, just a specific actual coaching session that what you worked with a client and manager on, where you influenced really significant behavioural change, and
Yeah.
that sort of to illustrate the points we've been making during this.
Absolutely, I can. Let me just think of the best one for you. So, about 3 years ago, I would say, I started working with a company with a really technically strong technical director. And this person was fabulous at the day to day. But as they'd progressed through the company, they got larger teams. Their teams were struggling. A lot to do with the reasons that we've spoken about already. So perhaps this person did see the management as a process, so they weren't engaging their team in that. They just didn't get on board with things such as performance reviews. They saw that as a tick box exercise. From speaking with them, I could see that delegation wasn't working brilliantly. I could also see that people weren't getting the opportunities that they should have been getting within the team. So we engaged on a 6-month coaching program. I was a little bit hesitant, I have to say. I wasn't sure whether this person was going to really embrace the coaching program, but they totally did. Full credit to them. So at the end of the 6 months, their managers could see significant behavioural change. I could see it being reported back to me in those accountability sessions. And actually, I picked up the phone to speak with them 2 weeks ago, as I do with my coachees, and they said to me, "I'm sorry, Rachel, I can't speak to you right now because I'm right in the middle of performance reviews." I never have been so delighted to be pushed to one side for a performance review. So it just shows you how much that behavioural change had embedded, really, and it was lovely to see.
That's a real success story. That's great. It's very rewarding for us too when